Hello and welcome to the Sports Wall as we discuss the what the final thoughts on the Packers season. I am joined with Andrew Rank and myself, Donnie. I don't know if we're going to be joined by anybody else or not during this, so we'll see what goes around. It's been a kind of a quiet week for the Packers, I'd say this week so far. I don't know if you guys have heard, but the big news of the week: Joe Barry has been let go. Um, Then also, I think it became official today. I think they also let the strength and conditioning coach or yeah, I
Strength and
guess you could
conditioning
call it a
coordinator,
coach
yeah.
coordinator go.
Gizzy.
Chris Gizzy. He was a former Packer, early 2000s, I believe. I think he was the one. He was the one that ran out with the flag after 9/11, I
Yep.
believe. So
Yep. He was an Air
yeah,
Force Academy graduate.
yep. So Andy, what are your thoughts on the news of the week so far?
I mean, I mean, I feel bad celebrating when a guy loses his job, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I think that the consistency wasn't there, and I I I do think the Packers' ceiling was limited with Barry as their coordinator. Now, moving forward, what does that mean? I mean, who knows who they're going to hire? Who knows if they're going to have success? I mean, I'm sure you've seen the images going around and what Kay Adams had said. I mean, since the beginning of Twitter, Packer fans have been calling for, to fire a defensive coordinator. I don't expect that to change, no
Yeah.
matter who it is, especially with the way the game is played. But I would like to see a defense that isn't consistently, the bottom 12% of the league in, yards given up and things like that. I'd like to
Yeah.
see more resistance through the middle of the field. I would like to see some more aggression. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. Although I do have some concerns with a uber aggressive style just because of the personnel on the back end.
Yeah. And going back to what I saw like a little snippet of Kay Adams on Twitter, and I had one problem with what she said. The whole us cheering Joe Barry, that's obviously we're doing it because we haven't been happy with the defense. We're not happy that he lost his job or anything like that, but
Well,
um
plenty of people are.
well,
I
yeah.
just don't. I don't want to celebrate it. I just,
Yes.
I
My
agree that the move was correct.
the issue I had with is she brought up he had the ninth ranked passing defense. Great. That
I
is
mean,
all
though you can
because they
skew
could
those
run the ball
numbers.
on us. They didn't have to throw the ball.
You could skew those numbers significantly. I mean,
Yes.
those numbers you can frame them to fit most narratives.
Yes, stats work for all sides. And I think that also worked. So like the 49ers had statistically a good run defense. It's because teams didn't run
Depends
the ball
what
on them.
it depends which stats you looked at.
They also had the fewest, and I don't we don't need to go into the 49ers game. We did that already. They had the fewest runs against or carries against in the season. They had the fewest against their defense.
But if you look at DVOA, those numbers showed the 49ers were not great against the run.
Okay.
But when you
I
play
didn't I didn't I didn't look at DVO. I'm just talking
when
statistically
you
overall.
But when you play from ahead, I
Yes.
mean, those are you build your team around that
Yeah.
type of thing. I mean, you can look at Dallas. It didn't work out in the playoffs for them, but
Yeah.
how did they build their team? They built their team around an explosive offense, assuming that they're going to be able to score a lot of points, force their opponents to score a lot of points. And so they
Yeah.
built their defense with pass rushers and opportunistic ball hawk type players. But you get behind in a situation like that, you're going to struggle. And I don't want to compare San Francisco and Dallas because they're very
No.
different
Yeah.
teams, but they're built in a similar way defensively. They also have Fred
Yeah.
Warner. And Fred Warner, I think, is the
He
best
covers up a
linebacker in
lot.
football. But they're much better. They're going to be much. They're so dynamic rushing the passer. They can rush the passer from the
Yes.
entire across the entire board.
Yeah.
And the Packers can't do that.
Well,
Unfortunately, they should be able to, but they can't.
and one thing like later in the season we noticed that and for except for 3 games where when we got the lead, Joe Barry's defense performed a little bit better. So when we played from in front, Joe Barry's defense played a little bit better.
Well, I mean, his entire tenure, their defensively, they have been better against the pass than they have been against the run, and
Yes.
that's, I mean, but that's part of that. That's part of that scheme. I mean, that bend but don't break style, right? Like that's part of the scheme. You don't want to give up anything deep downfield, but you live with a lot of the underneath type of stuff. You can still get beat over the top, but the way making the nickel into your sort of base defense, especially against some of the teams you play against, like Chicago for years was like that. Detroit this year. I mean,
Hmm.
when you make the nickel your base defense, it's absolutely a way for, if you run up against a decent run game, to just get run over. Just
Yeah.
and that's a it's just a you feel so defeated if you get just it's if somebody throws it and throws it and throws it, it's just like, what is going on? But
Yeah.
when you just get run over like that, I mean,
It's almost more
the effect
demoralizing.
it has mentally on a defense, I mean, you just feel like you're beat. It's just a
Yeah.
total different thing. You
Yeah.
feel like you've been dominated.
The whole tenure of Joe Barry's defense, I think the still image in my head is going to be 3rd and 1, and our corners are 10 yards off the ball.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I have too many images that would fit that to be able to pick one. But yes, that was a common theme. And to be fair, I mean, you've seen it in the first press conferences. I mean, it seems like there wasn't a ton of comfort playing a whole lot of press man in the secondary, either from the players or from Barry himself. But yeah, in situations like that, it needs to. I mean, if they need a yard, don't give them 10. I mean, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
pretty straightforward. I don't pretend to know more about football than Joe Barry, but I can figure that out.
I mean, and even when we hired him, I think the expectations weren't like out of this world for him to try to beat, because we had seen his defenses from previous teams.
They
He
were
was part of
terrible.
the 0-16 Detroit Lions. That should have been
They
a
were
telltale sign from the
well, they
beginning.
were terrible, but to be fair, he was on. I mean, I don't. Nobody could have made those defenses good.
No. But
To be fair, so I mean, you got to sort of take that with a grain of salt, but it still plays into it. You look at it and say, he coached the Lions and the Redskins, not the Commanders. Yeesh. I mean, that's not a ton of pedigree
yeah.
that you would really be looking for. But I mean, I don't think he was as bad as most people make him out to be. I think that the defense was bad in bad in the fourth quarter pretty consistently. I mean, when you think about how many times, and this isn't specific to Joe Barry. This goes back to 2000, what, 9, probably since 2008, since Rodgers took over. How many times has the defense let the Packers down
The only time was
late?
probably 2010 when they didn't let us down.
I mean, I mean, it's not every year that they
No.
have been beaten
But
because
then
of and they've lost in the playoffs because of their defense. But
since
I
then, it seems
mean,
to be a common theme. At least the
it,
defense
it's
hasn't been
been
up
it's
to.
been recurring for sure. So it's not specific to Barry. I mean, it's probably there is a cultural thing around it. I think in Green Bay, because for so long we've been built around the quarterback position, built around our offense, and so just that culture gets built up where the defense kind of feels like, hey, our offense is gonna bail us out, but it can't always do that. And to be fair to Barry, I mean, early in the season, right, the Packers offensively were terrible, absolutely terrible.
Hmm.
LaFleur was afraid to throw anything down the field, and they just, I mean, how many games in a row did they go without a first down in the freaking first 3 or 4 drives of the game? It was
Yep.
terrible.
Yep.
But the defense kept them in some games, and Barry, I mean, he deserves credit for that, right? You got to give credit where credit is due. He kept them in a lot of those games that they shouldn't have been in.
I think it's fair to also say though that the other teams didn't feel threatened by our defense, so they didn't feel like they necessarily were. They it. I think if they could have stepped on us a little bit more than what they did.
I mean, it's the NFL. If they don't feel threatened, they would have taken advantage. They would have
I mean,
taken
with
they
our
would they would have
offense,
scored more points.
they didn't feel threatened with our offense.
I mean, I can assure you that opposing teams were not leaving points on the board. We're not leaving points on the field because they didn't think we could because of our offense, right? I mean, you can look at it any way you want, but I mean, in those games, I think you have to look at the numbers and say, give credit where it's due. I mean, it wasn't just like a complete disaster every single game of the year. There was that 3 game stretch that was a complete mess. That was a disaster against the Giants, Tampa, and Carolina.
Yep.
That was terrible, and
Well, those were those
that
are
is
three
the stretch.
future Hall of Fame quarterbacks, so
But I mean, that was the
here.
stretch that probably got him fired, right? Like
Yeah.
if they play better in that stretch, he probably doesn't get fired. But even after that, I mean, they did change the way they played a little bit in a few weeks after that. And granted, Minnesota and Chicago, not particularly impressive offenses.
Yeah.
But they played well against Dallas until they took their foot off the gas. And as a whole, I mean, the defense is not the reason they lost to San Francisco. I mean,
No.
they're the I mean they gave up a late touchdown drive, right? So they certainly played a role. Everybody played a role. They
Yeah.
dropped some interceptions, things like that. They certainly played a role, but they were not the reason we lost. That was
No.
a ton of missed opportunities all over the place.
I definitely wouldn't put that final. I mean, they made some plays on that final drive in San Francisco. I think Ayuk made a catch with
Purdy played like crap for 3 quarters, three and a half quarters. But when it came time to do it, he made some impressive throws. They made
yeah,
some nice catches, and hey, they got it done when they had to. And um, Love finally really showed his inexperience after Zach Tom got hurt in that game.
yeah.
And I mean, that last interception, it doesn't matter who. I mean, you just can't make that throw. It doesn't matter who. There's not a quarterback in the league who can complete that pass. There's not a
No.
quarterback who's ever played who can complete
Well,
that
even Brett
pass.
Favre didn't make that pass, so he
Well,
threw an interception too.
he would have tried, but he would have thrown an
Oh,
interception. Yeah.
did you not see the side by side of the Minnesota throw in the against the Saints on the final
Oh yeah,
drive?
yeah, yeah.
That
The
was the
one
same
where that
same
was that
throw.
was another one of the Paul Allen gems.
Yeah. So
But I mean,
what? Go ahead.
Barry, you gotta take it in totality, right? And I think one thing you can consistently say is that his defenses did get better towards the end of the year. Every year he was here, they definitely did. They struggled against the run all constantly,
Mm-hmm.
and they were not particularly, excuse me, they were not particularly opportunistic. From a turnover standpoint, I would like to see a coordinator who is able to put us in position to make more plays on the ball. And it's not Joe Burry's fault that Darnell Savage is dropping a pass that hits him here or
Yeah.
Sean Nixon. I mean, that's not his fault. But if you look at or back over the course of 3 years, there were just not a ton of opportunities that I can remember. Like with under Pettin, Pettin got a lot of heat, but Pettin was a more aggressive play caller defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Capers was here for a long time. He had some good defenses. He had some bad defenses, but Capers' defenses tended to force turnovers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was one thing that I'd like to see is a little bit more of maybe exotic blitz packages and stuff like that instead of, I think that was one thing Barry was bringing more heat, but it wasn't necessarily exotic kind of looks and stuff like that.
Man, the
So,
more exotic you get, I mean, how many times you see our defense, somebody with do the wrong assignment in the wrong spot, something like that. I mean, the more exotic your defensive schemes are, the more likely it is for those guys to make more mistakes. And then on top of that, the more you blitz, the more you're putting your back end out there on an island alone. And for a few games, our back end was Ballantyne, Nixon, Anthony Johnson,
Jonathan Owens.
and Owens. Yeah, that's not going to strike fear into anybody. I mean, if you want to be aggressive up front and bring heat and stuff like that, you need to have faith in your back end. And I feel like he probably felt the need to protect them a little bit, and probably rightfully so. And I don't mean to get into an entire, like an hour of me defending Joe Barry. I'm trying to look at it from trying to keep it relatively even keel, trying to be sort of fair with my assessment. I do think it was time for him to go. I do think um, he did put a ceiling on how good the defense could be because of the style he played, but you still you know you never, at least me, it's not, you're not happy to see a guy get fired, but I also just, I feel like it's time to move on.
Different voice in there. What kind of what style do you what kind of style do you want to see then? Because
I
obviously
mean,
being passive didn't really work for us. And you're saying
I mean
aggressive. We don't. I know. I understand we don't have the personnel for aggressive, but
that's how I feel about that. Like I would love to see a more aggressive play style defensively, but I don't think you can do it unless you upgrade the personnel on the back end. I mean, Jair is a great corner. How often will he be available next year? Who knows? I mean, dealt with some injuries this year. Stokes has never been healthy in his life, and when he is healthy, he has never struck me as, elite cornerback. He could be a decent player, great athlete, but not an elite cornerback. I mean, Savage is a free agent. Jonathan Owens is a free agent. Anthony Johnson lost his job, but he was. I mean, he'll be a second-year player. Maybe he improves a little bit, but I think that if you want to be, if you want to turn the corner and become a super aggressive defense, that you're going to need to improve your safeties for sure. And I think they would also need to upgrade a middle linebacker. I mean, I keep mentioning Fred Warner's name. You're not going to find a Fred Warner in the
no.
draft, but you want somebody in that mold, right? Just somebody that can actually control the middle of the field, who can fill against the run, and who plays coverage pretty well. And without that, it's really hard to play those real aggressive styles.
Yeah. I think Quay is our closest comparison to Fred, just speed wise, but
No,
otherwise he doesn't
I
have
mean,
the
yeah,
coverage and stuff like that.
Quay is a great athlete, man. He really is a good athlete, and he's still super young. He could become a great player. I don't think there's a ceiling on him yet. Like he could become a really great player. Um, but yeah, he's just watching him. He seems raw. He doesn't get off blocks great. He doesn't fill great, but he can run. He really can move sideline to sideline.
Yeah. Um, so what are your thoughts? So I know I saw I think we had sent a message saying that Zimmer was in.
I mean, I don't know if that's, I don't
I
know
don't
if
know if
that's
that's real. I never saw it like
that.
Schneidman or
Yeah, me either.
Dabrowski or report it.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that's
I never saw a reputable report on
yes,
that.
yes. So who would you like to see as a replacement?
Um, I mean, I think I would like a guy that has mostly NFL experience. I know we've seen Jim Leonard's name thrown out. I believe LaFleur offered him the job before, and he turned it down. I mean, he played in the NFL. He played for Rex Ryan, so you get an idea of the way he would call games. Should likely be, in a very aggressive manner. You saw how those guys were at Wisconsin. They
Mm-hmm.
they were they were very aggressive. I don't know how well that would work. I think I would probably prefer somebody with more NFL coaching experience. But somebody like Leonard wouldn't upset me. I mean, we talked about Zimmer. I worry how Zimmer would coexist with the floor. He's got a big time personality, right? It seems like he can be quite hard headed and stuff like that. So you wonder how he would feel being subordinate to a young guy
There was
like
the
LaFleur.
there was the handshake video between him him and LaFleur from I don't remember if it was
Yeah,
Zimmer's last game with the Vikings and stuff like that floating around on Twitter.
yeah. I mean, you would struggle to see that. I've seen, I mean, Al Harris, I've seen that name and some other passing game coordinator, defensive passing game coordinators and stuff like that. And my concern there is that I don't want the secondary to be the focal point of our defense. I want it to be that front seven. I want it to be
Hmm.
the defensive line linebackers that are the dominant force. And that's not to say that they can't do it. It's just if you hire a DB's coach to be your defense coordinator, he's probably, there's a decent likelihood that the secondary is going to be the focal point. Whereas I think
Hmm.
it needs to start up front. Your secondary looks a lot better if the quarterback's on their back every play.
Yes.
Um, I mean, Martindale, I like the somebody like Martindale plays. LaFleur seems to speak highly of him. Evero, I mean, I've looked a little bit at that. I don't really know how I mean, I know he was a finalist, or they interviewed him last time. It's, it's hard to get a read on how good a coordinator would be based on his time in Carolina. Let's put it that way,
Yeah, I mean
because of how bad that
they were a pretty
team
good
was.
defense, but yeah, well, he he
I mean,
he's one that I'd like, and maybe it's just because of all the hype he was getting in season and stuff like that. Who knows what
yep.
their actual their de defense was like and stuff like that. But yeah, I
I
don't.
would like to find a guy who's going to play with aggression up front,
Yeah,
given that they do something to upgrade the back end.
and I mean, like we've said, we listed off all pretty much the entire safety room is in free agency, so there is a chance to revamp that room.
Well, I mean, Anthony Johnson is. I would have to double check on Jonathan Owens, but I'm pretty sure he only signed a 1 year deal.
Jonathan Owens was a free agent. Rudy Ford, um, and who else? There was one other one I feel like that was
Savage.
and Nixon. I guess
Nixon's a slot corner, but yeah,
yeah.
he's a free agent.
So
Savage is a
and
free agent.
Ballantyne I think is too. I don't know if he's
Valentine's,
restricted or not.
he shouldn't be. He should be unrestricted. He's like
Yeah,
28, 29.
yeah. So um, any other now? I know this isn't. I know this isn't 100%. I understand this is 0% chance, but Bill
No,
Belichick.
no, that would not. I don't think that would make the Packers better. If you want me to be honest, I I I think that that would just cause a headache between the defense coordinator and the head coach. And no, Belichick wouldn't and shouldn't ever take that job. In a perfect world, yeah, why not? But I just can't see him being a coordinator ever.
Unless he wants to sit out a year,
He might,
and he
or
very
be,
well could. Yes.
maybe come somewhere as just a defensive consultant. But I don't see him being a coordinator
I mean,
under any
they
circumstances.
were they were
I would
in
be
Green
stunned.
they were in Green Bay this year in preseason
No, that's right.
for OTA or practices and stuff like that. So him and LaFleur have a rapport,
Yeah, I mean,
and
maybe.
he was listing off all the history of the Packers in a press conference.
Well, I mean, he's an NFL history buff. I mean, that has been well documented. I just don't think. I mean, I don't think it's worth even wasting any time on because there's no chance, and frankly, I don't think it would work very well.
I don't disagree, but I think it's at least a phone call you at least got to make.
I mean, you can make the phone call, but I feel like it'd be insulting to say, "Hey, winningest coach of all time, most
If you don't make the
decorated
phone
coach
call,
of
you
all
don't know.
time, any interested in being my freaking assistant?"
Yeah. And I heard on I was listening on to the I don't remember. I think it was the Brian Bush show. I think he's got a radio in Madison or Milwaukee. And they had Matt Schneidman on and he said Mike Vrabel will not be a
No,
defense coordinator for the
I
Green Bay
never would have
Packers.
expected that. I don't think him and Lafleur like each other at all.
Well, and why would he come work for LaFleur after he was just LaFleur was on his staff, wasn't he?
Yeah, Lafleur was his offensive coordinator
Yeah. So why would
when
he
he got
come
hired
then
to be
take
the
a
head
job
coach of the
underneath him?
Packers. No, I know that. I wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that at
Yeah.
all. I don't think they like each other very much. I don't have any factual basis for saying that. It's just kind of a feeling I have.
Yeah. Is there I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. I know the Carolina the Carolina defensive coordinator would be nice.
Ever, yep.
Yeah. There's nobody with in-house really worth
I
promoting that
mean,
I could think of.
no, I mean the other name I saw as a potential one, and this is another defensive coordinator, was Joe Witt Jr., who has experience in Green Bay. I think he was here under LaFleur for a year or two before McCarthy got hired. And yeah, no, maybe he was here for a year before McCarthy got hired in Dallas.
Wood Jr.
Um,
sounds familiar.
he was definitely here under McCarthy. I think
Yeah.
he was here for a year under LaFleur. Um, That's another name I've thrown around, but again, that's a secondary guy. And I mean, like I said, I want somebody who's going to, focus our attention on dominating up front rather than trying to hold on the back end.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye. Like I said, I haven't seen anything, no names
No,
thrown out by
I
anybody
haven't seen
reputable.
nothing. Yeah, I mean, do you have the Athletic?
I do not.
You do not. Okay, yeah. I mean, I like Schneidman,
I
but
just
yeah,
follow like Schneidman and Dombrowski and
he has
those
not.
guys.
Yeah, he has not
Now,
said anything.
what about special teams?
So this is one, and this is why I put that in our notes there. Like I was surprised a little bit that Bisaccia didn't get more heat than he got. I mean, yes, LaFleur stood by Carlson, but I'm not talking about Carlson at all. Like you could take him out of the equation completely. I do not think they were very good on special teams again. And it's year after year after year. And from what we know, Bisaccia is one of, if not the highest paid special teams coordinator
Mm-hmm.
in football. And their coverage units are always scary. They so many penalties, so many mistakes. They're backing up our offense, especially early in the year when our offense was struggling so much. And every time we returned a kickoff, returned a punt, we were committing a penalty, backing us up to the 10-yard line. And now you have a bad offense having to go 90 yards every single play, every single drive, and we can't get a first down.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a bit surprised that he didn't. There wasn't more calls for him to be let go. I mean, I didn't see it brought up at all. I was surprised that, and I'm sure if you know everybody didn't want Joe Barry fired, maybe it would have taken on more of a life of its own. But I was just surprised that there wasn't more for that. I think that they can be so much more fundamentally sound on special teams. And I mean, penalties on special teams, that is a mark, that is coaching. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
penalties anywhere is coaching, um, especially at those high levels. Penalties are going to happen.
Yep.
But when you become one of the most penalized teams in football, that is got to be a coaching point. And they just over and over and over again failed to address that throughout the course of the year. So I mean, it seems like everybody likes him. He seems like he's a good person to have on staff. I really hope we see better performance next year. And otherwise, I think we will start seeing calls for his head as well.
So I have a theory on this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with us, how young of a team we were, I think played a factor into that because
But
special
that's every team.
set. Hold on,
Every team puts their
hold
young
on,
guys on
hold
special
on,
teams.
hold
I
on,
don't buy that excuse.
and then injuries on top of that. So you
I don't
have
buy that
Alexander and
excuse
Stokes
at
go down.
all.
You lose Ballantyne and Valentine. Those are probably special teams guys. Okay, you gotta remember that everybody who gets hurt on defense and offense are probably playing special teams, or then the guys behind them have to move up. So it's just
I don't buy this excuse at all. Like penalties are the result of making a physical mistake and compounding it with a mental mistake. Physical mistakes happen. If you miss a block, you miss a block. But the penalty piece of it is a coaching point, and you can absolutely minimize penalties. And the fact that it continued the entire year is problematic to me. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you have on special teams. Every team has injuries. Every team puts the young guys on special teams, but not every team commits penalties at the rate that the Packers
I mean, I I can't argue it, but all I can say is special teams has never been a priority in Green Bay.
do. Never.
So until I
29th.
mean they changed it last year and it approved. We had I think we cut well, I can't even remember what his name is. I think he was number 6. I think we cut him like halfway through the year anyways, and we brought him in just for special teams. I think it was like
Yeah, it happens.
Lavette or something like that.
I mean, it happens. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the Goslin rankings, and Goslin rankings are not
Well,
be all end all, but the Packers are 29th.
how do you do rankings for special teams?
I don't know what the formula is. I mean, I could
You know,
probably
and
look
I'm
into it and
sure I'm
figure it
sure
out.
our kicker probably plays a big role into it with all
No,
the
it's the kicker plays some of it, but it's more going to be coverage and returns and your
okay.
ability to block and things like that. Green Bay worst in the league in penalties on special teams. That's going to be another part of it as well. I
Well,
mean, here he's only showing best and worst for different things, but
he's one of the best in the business, so I'm gonna
I
you know better than
mean,
I do.
he's highly respected, and all I was saying was I was surprised that we didn't hear more about it. Yeah, I'm not seeing any details. I'll see if I can figure out sort of the formula. But
Yeah.
yeah, 29th out of 32, worst in the league in penalties.
Well,
That's not impressive, and that needs to be fixed next year.
yeah, for sure. For sure. And I know, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We got the rest of the off season to worry about it and stuff like that. So, you got anything else on Barry at
So
all?
not on Barry, but I'll say. I mean, when you mentioned Schneidman, I pulled up the Athletic and looked, and he does have his list of 10 free agents or 10 candidates for the defensive coordinator. A couple
Okay.
names. I mean, number of names that we talked about: Martindale, Leonard, Evero, Al Harris, Mike Zimmer. A couple names that I hadn't thought about that I was surprised to see on here: Jack Del Rio.
Oh, geez.
Del Rio was a great defensive coach. I don't.
Is
Game might have passed him by.
is Riverboat Ron
Um,
on there?
no, he's not. Jack Del Rio and Leslie Frazier
I've
were
heard Leslie Frazier's name thrown around.
were two names that caught my eye. The rest of the names, I'll run down the list real quick, but those were two that caught my eye: Wink Martindale, Jim Leonard, Evero, Shane Bowen, Tennessee Titans defensive coordinator, Al Harris, Leslie Frazier, Steve Belichick, Mike Caldwell, Jack Del Rio, and Mike Zimmer.
Okay.
Those are the candidates that this was by LaFleur and Diana Rossini. Those
Okay.
are the candidates that they
I'll, I'll be
listed
kind of
out there.
curious
But
to see what happens with Steve Belichick. If his dad sits out, what happens with him?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not good enough to be able to judge
He can't
whether
ride
or
the
not he did a
coattails of
good
his
job
dad
or not.
anymore.
Well, that's what I mean. I can't judge whether or not he did a good job
Hmm.
or not. Um,
All right. You got anything else on Joe Barry?
nope.
All right. Well, um, I think we'll come back. I don't know.
We got a couple minutes left if you want to. I mean, there was one more thing I had just put on the
Sure.
notes. Just real high level. I mean, we've talked mostly about the defense here, and I'm sure this is going to be part of it. And this will mesh with what we've talked about. But looking forward, as we move into the off season, just at a high level, what are some of the areas you would like to see the Packers address and improve on, and really look at um, before next year?
Um, well, we will need to address the backup running back spot because I don't think we have anybody on the roster other than Aaron Jones because I know AJ Dillon is. I think is Patrick
Patrick
Taylor a free
Taylor?
agent? I think Wilson may be a free agent or at least a restricted free agent, I think. Um, we'll definitely need something there. And then
Looking,
and then
looking at Sport Track now.
you got to look at offensive line for sure on offense at least. Wide receiver, I think we're fine. Quarterback, we're fine. Tight end, we're fine.
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver is a position that I don't think you need to address unless somebody falls to you
Yeah.
in the draft, right? So if somebody falls for some reason and you can get a talented player, then
Yep.
grab them for sure. Um, the running back position is definitely one offensively they're going to have to address in some way. They're going to have to do something with Aaron Jones. We'll talk more about that when we look at the roster, probably in a couple of weeks. they'll figure out what they're doing there. Dylan, I would be surprised to see him back. I
Yep.
really like AJ Dillon, but you can get a younger guy for cheaper. Then what he'll get on his second contract, I agree. Offensive line is definitely a need. I mean, there's only two positions there that I am mostly content with, and that's going to be left guard and right tackle. Credit to Rasheed Walker, he played relatively well for the course of throughout the course of the year. I don't see him as a long term answer. Um, Sean Ryan,
Can I ask
I
why?
mean,
This is only his first year.
yeah, he just doesn't look natural there to me. When you watch a guy like Bakhtiari go into his drop, go into that set, it looks so natural
Mm-hmm.
for those top tier guys. To me, Rasheed Walker just he doesn't look natural. And I could be
Okay.
wrong, but if you get a chance to draft a franchise a cornerstone left tackle in the first round next year, I would take it.
Okay.
Um, I know the Packers have had a lot of success in the middle to late rounds with their offensive linemen, but I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Um, and then defensively, I mean, we talked about this. I would like to be able to improve at the linebacker position. I don't know how likely that is. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
realistic that is in free agency, but maybe they hit on something in the draft. But I 100% think they need to improve their
Yeah.
secondary. I mean, Jair, I am confident Jair will be back. Ignore his, we'll ignore his Instagram post
Yeah.
until
Well,
I
he's
feel.
got an untradeable contract next year at least. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah, so I don't know what that was. Stokes, I mean, you can't have any faith that Stokes is going to be available 17 games
We'll
at
see
this
what the
point,
hamstring
right?
doctor says.
And Valentine's exciting, but I don't think he's ready yet. I think he can be a good player, but technically he's still got a long ways to go. And then at the safety position,
Yep.
they have to stock up somewhere.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be opposed to seeing one more pass rusher with Kingsley being out probably all of next year. Would
Yeah, it
hate to see
depends how
one more
quick.
pass rusher. Can never have too much on the D line.
I mean, I wouldn't. Again, unless somebody falls to you, I wouldn't go out of my way
No.
to draft that.
And
But
the
I wouldn't.
Packers
I mean,
never
yeah,
typically go out of their
third,
way to get
fourth,
anybody
fifth,
anyways. So
third, fourth, fifth round. Yeah, I'd be okay with that. But I don't. I wouldn't want to see it. I wouldn't want to see them use premium draft capital on it unless there was a real reason to.
so all right. Well, this has been the Sports Wall talking about Joe Barry and the rest of what's going to happen. So we will see you maybe next week. We'll see. I know you got Super Bowl. We got a buy in between the Super Bowl, so we'll see if we come out with next week or we'll wait until the following week. So
We'll have something.
this has been the Sports Wall. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching. See ya.